Over the last 30 to 40 years, we've been witnessing an absolutely unique phenomena. The People's Republic of China, whatever you think about it, and I'm not really here neither to condemn nor to endorse anything about it, but if you have eyes to see, you will see economic development achieving things nobody thought were possible. Nobody understood in those days what the Chinese were doing. And in those days, it was only the beginning, and you could be excused for not paying all that much attention. They were one of many very poor countries in the world who were trying to stop being poor countries in the world. Americans might have read the novel by Pearl Buck, The Good Earth. If you ever did read that book, we had to in high school. Well, you learned what the poverty was like. It was, for a suburban kid like me, it was hard to get my head around what that kind of poverty is like. In the last 30 to 40 years, the Chinese achieved a level of economic development that took several centuries in Western Europe. And it took a good century and a half, counting conservatively, here in the United States. We've never seen anything like it. What the Chinese did was to mobilize, borrow from the rest of the world, no question, but put all that together in a successful mix. If your measuring rod is economic growth, lifting people out of poverty, and let's remember, 1.4 billion people, 4 to 5 times the population of the United States. They were able to do it. Not only that, they now compete with the United States at the highest levels of technology. What we get from Intel or Apple, they have their equivalent. And in some cases, they're already ahead of us. I'll give you an example. 10 or 15 years ago, every major car-producing company in the world undertook a program to develop the electric car, the electric vehicle, to replace the fossil fuel burning oil and gas vehicle. And we have many examples of that being produced. However, one example outranks everybody else. The electric cars of China are better and cheaper than anybody else's. They won the competition. That happens all the time. Just other companies in other countries at other times won equivalent competitions. The response of the United States has been to impose a tariff to make the better, cheaper electric car from China unaffordable. The current rate of tariff applied by the Biden government is 100%. So, for example, if the electric car from China costs you $30,000 that have to be sent to China to pay for the car, you've got to give them, to the car dealer, $30,000 to pay off the Chinese, and another $30,000, 100%, goes to Uncle Sam, so that the cost to an American would be $60,000 for that $30,000 car. Okay? There are no electric cars from China on the road in the United States. A quarter of the electric cars on the road in Europe are the Chinese cars. The greatest producer, the most successful, the most rapidly growing car company in the world, most Americans have never heard of. It has 3 initials, B as in boy, Y, and D as in dog, BYD Corporation. The response of the United States is to freeze them out. This is self-defeating. And, to be an economist for a moment, stupid. Why? Everywhere else in the world, as the transition to electric vehicles is underway, every competitor of the United States across all industries will be able to buy the best car at $30,000 with which to compete with the American company, whereas the American company is going to have to pay more than $30,000 for the non-tariff equivalent, which will cost you $40,000 to $50,000 for an inferior vehicle. When I went to school and they taught me economics, this is somewhere between self-defeating and stupid, and a little bit of both. When I got my PhD in economics at Yale years ago, my classmate was a woman. I remember her because she was unusual. Her name was Janet Yellen. Okay, she's now the Secretary of the Treasury in the United States government. I know that she knows it's self-defeating. She knows it's stupid. She's out there advocating it because that's the position of the government. The United States is losing the competition with China. This is a self-defeating behavior, typically of somebody who's desperate. Instead of outcompeting the Chinese, coming up with a plan to try at least to do that, you are, lifting up the barriers. They tell themselves in Washington that they're isolating the Chinese. They're not. They're isolating themselves. The rest of the world looking at the United States and they see an empire going down and they get the pleasure that comes from that. And we ought to wake up as a nation and figure this out. Every part of the poor world, and the poor world is the vast majority of Asia, Africa, Latin America, for sure, plus large parts of North America and Europe too. They all wanted 40 years ago to do something, but the Chinese actually did it. That's the question that has to be asked. Did they build on what went before? Absolutely. Absolutely they did. The Chinese, for example, and this is misrepresented in the West, again, for defensive reasons. People say that Chinese built on the West's technology. That's true. Of course that's true. But the Chinese didn't do that in any mysterious way. 25 years ago, they made a decision that they would say to the developed world whom they hoped to imitate, the United States, Western Europe, Japan, and so on. We will give you a deal. We understand you're capitalists. We understand that profit is the bottom line, blah, blah, blah. And here's what we're going to give you. Two things. Number one, an educated, disciplined, incredibly cheap labor force. And number two, the biggest growing market in the world. In a business school, we tell budding young entrepreneurs, if you want to know where to go and focus your energy, go where the labor is cheap and the market is growing. Okay, they went to China. And they went because they did exactly what we told them to do. They made a ton of money. That forced all of those who were not yet ready to do that to realize if you don't go to China too, these guys are going to outcompete you. They're going to bring that stuff back, made with cheaper labor, and they have the Chinese market. General Motors now sells more cars in China than it does in the United States. These are the developments, and everybody wanted to do it, but the Chinese did it. And the whole organization called the BRICS is an organization that is internationalizing the Chinese model. And that, too, ought to worry the United States a great deal more than it currently does. The 20th century bequeaths to us, let's call it the Anglo-American, mostly private economic system, private enterprise, private capitalist, profiting, all of that, and bequeaths us the Soviet Union. The attempt as an alternative to build it with government-owned and operated enterprises, at least in the industrial sector, not so much in agriculture, but there too, let's call them, for lack of a better, a polar opposite. Then it's not surprising, given how human beings work, that along would come a group of people who have something they don't like about the first one, and something they don't like about the second one. And so they conceive the idea, would we get from a hybrid something that would capture the best of the one, the best of the other, and get rid of, discard the parts of both of them that we don't like? You could, I think, make a very good case that that's what Mao Zedong, the Chinese Communist Party, that's what they are. People forget, but they shouldn't, that in the 1960s, Soviet Union and their proteges in China came to war with one another. They did not agree on things that would make them shoot at each other's people and hurt each other. I mean, the divisions were very profound. So no one should be surprised that the Chinese made the decision to welcome foreign enterprise. Bring us your technology because you are ahead of us in a dozen ways, which they said. If you read Chinese journals, they've been full of that for years. Much of what those Chinese journals did was to take from the United States and try to figure out how to do the same thing a little bit better. But 90% of what they did was learn from the United States, and they paid for that in all the ways they normally. Nobody stole the that's childish. Nobody put a gun to the heads of the American companies that went over and made the deal. We will give you our technology. We will show it to you. We'll teach it to you. You got to give us the labor. You got to give us access to the market. We're getting profit out of it. You're getting technology. That was the deal. That was a deal on the table, crystal clear. To represent it now is really cheating. It's like my saying, I'm going to give you $5. You give me your shirt, and we make the exchange. You have my $5. I got your shirt. And then I start screaming, he stole my shirt. No, stop. You didn't steal my shirt. We had a deal. You may have changed your mind. You may regret it. That's another matter. But nobody stole anything from you. And the Chinese, they resent that because for them, that's the 100 years of humiliation again. Because what they hear is the subtext. You're too stupid. You're too backward. You're too Chinese to figure these things out. And so you must have stolen it. You couldn't have done it without, we are the center. And I know where it comes from. For a good long while, the United States was the center of innovation, was the great breakthrough technology. Silicon Valley deserves part of the reputation it has. I get that. But so do the achievements on the basis of that. And if you're honest about Silicon Valley, you'll know that a lot of what they did there was also borrowing things that had been developed elsewhere in the world, as it has always been. If you have a society that arises on the decay of another one of the things that often happens is a kind of, for lack of a better term, chauvinism. That is, the winner in the game rewrites the history. And in that history, their own people, their own communities are the dynamic, are the breakthrough, are the, and the achievements of others are second rate or they're downplayed. And then it's not a big step until they're forgotten altogether. For me, the example is baseball. When I was young, I was in love with American baseball. And I was in love with a sport that I understood was white. And I remember occurring to me, why are there no black people in the baseball? And the answer was, they don't do that, or they can't do that. I was around early enough that I remember the importance of Jackie Robinson as the breakthrough black player. Nowadays, we understand that black people, to be as mild about it as I can, are very good at sports and are very important in our professional sports, like overwhelmingly so. And that they were, now you get the idea, they were not out of the game because of their athletic skills. There were other reasons. And the same thing I think applies here. If your economy is based in a certain way of making decisions, then your civilization rises and falls on that basis. The collapse of the Chinese empires of the past were that they were built on, to use the language of economics, a feudal class structure, a class structure of lords and serfs, like what we had in Europe, in the 1,000 years between the end of Rome and the Renaissance, or however you want to date it, it doesn't matter. But that system, which enabled European feudal society to achieve remarkable things, also was the seeds of their own downfall. And why do I say that? Because it's directly applicable to what the China story. China wants to cash in on all the achievements of private capitalism, which are significant. Modern industrialization, all of that. But they are also aware, partly because of their ideology, that what can carry you forward can also drag you down. And you've got to be careful to understand that possibility, to be alert for it, and not to miss it when it comes. And here's how it came to the United States and China. We innovate in this country insofar and when it is profitable to somebody to develop it. Somebody sees, I can make a ton of money doing it this way or this new way. We celebrate that, we are proud of it, and it achieved a lot. I'm the last one to deny it. I teach that material to my students. What did the Chinese do? They said, yes, but if you make that the key, If the only innovation program you undertake is the one that is privately profitable, you are going to miss opportunities, you are going to underfund opportunities, and it's going to drag you down. We in China, this is how they explain it. We in China say, half the economy, you do that private profit-driven technological, do it. And we'll let you become millionaire. After the United States, China is the second country in terms of the number of private millionaires and billionaires that they have. So they've allowed that to happen. But in the other half of the economy, we're not doing that. We're going to make decisions about economic development, including technological change, based on the social objectives the Communist Party and its government define. So, for example, we want to be ahead of the United States in certain new areas. We didn't have private enterprise to undertake it. Who cares? We'll do it. We'll do it. Maybe the private will catch on later and they'll do it. Okay, then we'll do something else. But as long as we're going to make decisions, and there's the solution. They are able to say, we're going to invest in things that Americans don't. Is it because Americans can't? No. Do we lack the technology? No. Do we have the scientists who can do it? Yes. But we have an economic system that is so set up that those opportunities that aren't now privately profitable get the short end of the stick. They're not never there, but they are the ones that we dream about, but we don't invest in. They don't do that. When they talk, they say, is profit important to us? Yes. Is it the beginning and the end of the conversation? Oh, no. Not the bottom line. It is one among a set of objectives, and our strategy is focused on all those objectives, not the prioritization of private profit. By the way, that's what they mean when they say socialism. That's what they mean.